the onslaught he got from Faisal Islam and also from the audience. I think he thought this would be relatively easy, and I don't think he'd done enough homework, enough thought had gone into that interview and confrontation on Thursday night. And I think the Prime Minister will be kicking himself for not doing so.
And then he not someone who's on much of a learning curve these days, he then goes on breakfast television and falls out with Kate Garraway, or one of these wonderful sofa ladies who are national institutions more than the Prime Minister is, and he started to get a bit short with her because she wasn't having a lot of the wild card in this referendum vote. Can we cope with a town the size of Nottingham moving to the UK every year? Might be having a beneficial impact, but he says not. So why don't you tell us all, share his wise words with all of us?
Well, he basically says there's been no real change in the polls. He points out there have been very few polls this week, and that all the attention is being on the poll, which suggests that the public are now in favour of leaving. And he says, look, this is all the problem now. You get a poll that's a bit out of line with the rest, and everybody sort of jumps on it and says, gosh, there's been a huge movement in opinion. And yet John's considered view is that over the weeks, this week, is that there has been no great change in public opinion. And my hunch is that he's right on that. The only problem we have is that the polls are all over the place.
And I was also about to say, help me about John, who I'm sure is an estimable man, kind to animals, helps old ladies cross roads, that sort of thing. Where was he on the last election? Was he the man who saw through the guff and said the Tories are going to get a majority, even though we now know not much of a majority and not enough to do anything much with, but they did get a majority? Did he foresee that?
I don't think he did foresee that, no. And no doubt if I'm wrong on this, he or his friends will ring me up. I don't think anybody actually foresaw the result of the last election. What I would say on this is, look, polls, we now realise that polls are no longer really up to the job. There are failings within the polling system which are incredibly complicated to explain and even more complicated to remedy, which mean that the polls can no longer be trusted in the way they could be. On this particular matter, the referendum, we're not used to doing polls on single issues, and for that reason they're to be distrusted even more. And look at what we've had. I mean, about 10 days ago, I think it was, maybe a little slightly longer, there was a poll saying it was 18%. There was the Remain side had an 18% lead. Now we're talking about a small lead for exit. That is a 20% divergence. And what has happened that might cause such a diversion? I don't think the answer is we don't really know where we are. My own view is that in the final few days of the campaign, people will decide, actually, let's stick with what we've got rather than take the risk.
But then permit Mystic Mellor to feel his crystal balls here and say, look, Mystic Mellor thinks, his mysticity, his mysticness thinks this, and that is that so far as the Stay campaign is concerned, they've fired all their cannons, right? Everybody on earth, it would seem, who has any sort of role in international business or politics is telling us we have to stay in. They've been there, done that. There's nothing more for them to do except hope that that message takes root. For the Brexiteers, there is what Harold Macmillan said, events, dear boy, events. Any more sign that the EU has totally lost control of migration? The now obvious fact that Theresa May, insofar as she ever had any control over migration, has lost control of it with these little rubber dinghies shooting across the channel. Though that might play both ways, because they'd still do that whether we're in the EU or not. But also the fact that you look at France, look at the mess.
And most likely related to immigration and large numbers of people turning up in dinghies or whatever on the south coast. But my feeling is that probably most people's views are pretty well set on this one, and my feeling is that the Remain side will win, and no doubt on the programme following the 23rd, what will be the 25th, you will show me to be horribly wrong.
Assuming I am
spared.
Well. No, I'm not necessarily saying it, because I'm slightly sort of feeling a bit divorced from this. I will not vote to stay in, because I just think Dave should never have inflicted this on us.
Are you going to vote to leave?
If I voted Brexit, it would be because, you know what, my theory is you've had enough of, and I've given you one, so I won't weary you with another one, except to say, my view is, if we voted for Brexit, it would never come to that. They'd just start throwing a few concessions around. For instance, free movement of people. Yeah, if you're the Prime Minister of Hungary or the Czech Republic or whatever, you can be wild about free movement of people, because no one in their right mind wants to go and settle there, do they? A lot of these places, they don't. Here it's a different thing, and if we can opt out of the euro, if we can opt out of a whole lot of other things, why can't we opt out of, as the price of us staying in the EU, free movement of people? Why not?
So you're saying that we could vote to leave the EU and then just reach some accommodation where we sort of have associate membership?
There's a lot,
which we're halfway there anyway.
But they're talking a lot of cobblers. I'm trying to remember what words we're allowed to use by the radio, by the regulators. Anyway, let's just say cobblers, shall we?
Perhaps they should give us a little list at the side of the desk.
Exactly. Cobblers. The idea that we leave and a united Europe suddenly says, away with you, we're going to drive the trade, we don't care, we got a 90 billion trade surplus with you guys, you can go, and I won't say a word, I might have thought, you can go off somewhere, okay? That's not going to happen. First of all, because their own self-interest would mean it wouldn't, but also the hemorrhage to the European project, which is pretty sick. Europe used to have 30-odd% of world trade, and now it's got 17%. The idea that us going leaves a united Europe, confident and happy, rubbish. In every...
trouble with your argument, though, David, is that if they say, okay, well, I know you voted to leave, but we'll allow you, you're going to stay, you can be associate members, we'll cut down on freedom of movement and all of that, is that it means that everybody else will want their own terms of membership, and the whole thing will fall apart.
My guess, and we're going to have to go and have an exciting travel thing, and I'm sorry to be delaying this for people, but I mean, what is completely nonsense is that people will be glad to see the back of us. It's the superstructure of the EU boat is blown away, and maybe it's below the waterline. You mark my words, Mystic Mellor speaks.
Still to come, we'll talk to Dame Margaret Beckett, Labour grandee and former Foreign Secretary, about suggestions that Labour voters don't know the official party line on the EU referendum. But after the travel, we'll talk to Peter Oborne about David Cameron's performance as leader of the Remain camp. Call 03456060973 to get involved.